COVID. Before the COVID loan, what was the first money we took for COVID? It was money from the stabilization fund. Right? It was a 250 million, initial 250 million from the stabilization fund. As we speak, we've taken over 400 million in the name of COVID from the stabilization fund. Now, why do we need a reset? Even on this. And we call them budget buffers. Mm-hmm. It was from the global financial crisis, which was the deepest crisis. It was a lesson from the global financial crisis, which was the deepest crisis the world suffered after the depression before COVID. I'm not denying that COVID was not.
Yeah.
250 million from one oil field, 70,000 barrels average. We bequeath 2 oil fields. If you do pro rata, close to 200,000 barrels, pro rata. If you had put 250 per oil field, let's even leave the first one aside. 500 plus 250. If you had added on account of the first oil field another 250, 1 billion US dollar would have been in the stabilization fund. You would not have gone to the IMF for $1 billion. That is how you win yourself from the IMF when you are in trouble. So they left the vision. They left the vision, of which, let me say, the MPP participated. Why are we setting up the stabilization fund? Why are we putting money aside? It's just like our parents again. If all the money profit from the market, my mom was a simple cloth dealer. If it was all the money were being put for clothes, for food, for whatever, some of us wouldn't be sitting. Maybe me and you will not be sitting where we are sitting today. Right? Mm-hmm. So the lesson, what we need to reset, is that with 3 oil fields, we failed Ghanaians to put money aside for crisis. And I can tell you that we pray that it doesn't happen. We have imports. You see, when you're running an economy, you cannot run an economy devoid of crisis. Mm-hmm. Contingency fund. We put some money aside. That was the beginning. It wasn't enough. I heard people talk about the second anniversary of Kwame Nkrumah, the 10th or whatever anniversary of the Kwame Nkrumah fire and how do you call it?
The second
flooding,
flooding and fire disaster.
Yes.
Yeah.
We put money again from oil, contingency fund. It's in the Constitution. These 2 things, debt repayment, and it's in the Constitution. We never established them since 2012. The first monies we took from them for relief was through Parliament, the contingency fund. And the thing about the contingency fund is that when you take the money out, you must pay back. We took it out 2015, 2016. It's not been replaced. Come Akosomo, spillage. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Again, you see how we're struggling? Had we put with 3 oil fields some money aside, look, it isn't that the Mama administration did not need the money. Remember, crude oil prices fell in 2015, and we kept the money. In fact, the sinking fund, among the debts that we were not paying was the first sovereign bond. The first sovereign bond was among the debt that we were not paying. When we established the sinking fund, we used 350 million to pay down the 750 million. It was left with 400 million. Mm-hmm. Because we knew that we were going to win 2017, we refinanced 200 million because our scenario, crude oil prices had fallen. So instead of provisioning for the remaining 400 million, we asked the World Bank to give us money to refinance so that we can pay with the sinking fund over time, what we were not doing. That is the World Bank bond which is impaired today, and which, as a result of Ghana's, experience with that bond, right, the World Bank cannot repeat it for other African countries. So let me just wrap up. I asked you how many, so I'm saying that what I want you to know is that 350 approximately plus 200 refinancing 550. Ask yourself, where was the money for the 200 left? We left it in the sinking fund. The current government used it to pay the final balance of 200 October 4th on the 10th anniversary when the bond fell due. Is that not enough lesson to learn? That we then also issued other bonds, and therefore you must also put money in the sinking fund. And you kept borrowing and borrowing and borrowing without putting the money, depleting it, in fact, using a conduit because of COVID to clean it. Don't we need a reset? From even these examples I'm giving, doesn't Ghana need a reset? You think that we should continue these bankrupt policies to further bankrupt the economy? No. That's what President Mahama was talking about. These are but a few examples of what he's talking about.
So is it that you don't trust the measures that have been put in place?
Do you trust them?
By this government to get us out.
Did you get the haircut?
At least we are seeing.
No, did you get the haircut?
But at least we are seeing some results, Aaron.
Every government has results.
We're seeing some of the macroeconomic indicators improve. We're seeing inflation.
No, but the point I'm making is
and all of that, because some measures have been put in place to try and get us back on track.
That doesn't mean
because
that
of the ravages of the pandemic.
But that doesn't mean
you're not satisfied with that.
Are you still pressing the point about the pandemic when I've told you why at least we shouldn't even have gone for 1 billion?
Yeah.
Let's come to the pandemic. Did you know that we get $6 billion US for the pandemic?
Yes.
To resolve the pandemic? And we are still offering excuses. You want me to take Ghanaians? Apart from the 250, which we took, let me put that aside for the 400 million almost, which we took on account of COVID.
Yeah.
We took a COVID loan of 1 billion. We got the SDR for 1 billion. That's 2 billion. Bank of Ghana, under the pretext of COVID, depleted our reserves and everything. 1.7 billion US equivalent. That's 3.7 billion. Now you can add approximately 300 that was taken from, and that gives you, what? Nearly 4 billion. World Bank gave us money, right? Development partners gave us money.
Yeah, so we got a lot of money.
No, yes, we got a lot of money. Yes. And therefore I'm saying that is even the reason. Ask yourself, how many countries, even in Africa, let's not leave Africa, how many countries in Africa got 6 billion to resolve COVID? And we continue using COVID as an excuse. Remember, we even had COVID levies, we increased taxes and the rest. As the IMF said, the reason the government could not turn this economy around on account of COVID is because of what they use, the word pre-existing. The fund wanted Ghanaians to know. It ordered an audit into the COVID. And they wanted Ghanaians to know that the excuse of COVID, the excuse of, Ukraine and the rest were lame. And why were they lame? That was because there were pre-existing conditions. Because the IMF's own Article 4, 2019, revised our budget deficits when they said we were doing 3.8, when they said we were doing, 4.7, they said we were doing 5.3. Article 4, please ask your producers to Google.
So what were
Excuse me, so let me finish. I'm saying that they Googled, ask them to Google. They revised the figures to 7% and 7.5. Those were the deficits that we were experiencing. Pushing things under footnotes. I was in this studio talking about the risk of not accounting fully for liabilities. They push them under footnotes. So the IMF is telling us that Ghanaians, please listen. In the Article 4 that was done in 2023, that there were pre-existing conditions.
What were those pre-existing conditions, and where did those pre-existing conditions come from? Is it pre-existing conditions due to the lack of proper management of this administration from when they took over the reins of government in 2017? Is that it, or these are pre-existing conditions which have plagued our economy, which transcends just the NPP government? Perhaps even
it doesn't transcend.
when the NDC government was in power.
Yes, we
because
had
at the point you also went to the IMF, and by the time that the NPP came into
when
office,
they took the money.
I didn't even
add that money.
They continue with the IMF program.
Yes,
so
I didn't even add that money.
The economy already. That resulted in you having to go to the IMF, right?
Please add it to the 6 billion. Add that money to the 6 billion, and you are getting 7 billion. You see, sometimes we make matters worse by bringing some even facts out, which are overlooked. Add it. So let me repeat. Yes, let's blame it squarely on the government, just like the vice president. Ambushing, for example, when I was reading a budget and giving a briefing, I don't know if you were there.
Yeah.
And telling Ghanaians so that, yes, so let me repeat. I'm saying that because of the lack of foresight, that we would experience that it is inevitable to run a government. That it is inevitable to run a government without crisis, and therefore you must prepare for crisis. Because they didn't take that seriously. That's fault number one. That's a pre-existing condition. We blew our buffers. And let me give you an example from the advanced countries. The mighty US struggled from the subprime crisis, which was the cheap loans that were given for housing people who couldn't pay, which caused the global financial crisis. Their version of the central bank and treasury bought back the bonds. So we come to banking. If we had those buffers, ESLA would have bought back the bonds from the banks, from the U.S. experience, and not collapse the banks.
But please. We'll get into that.
But I'm giving you.
We'll get into that because some comments have been made.
But I'm giving you that.
So we'll get into that. But I want us to, stay on it and finish with this point.
Yes, because that's a very important. Because it's very important. That's why I brought it. So we can come to it, right? So one, you blew the buffers. But I'm giving you the U.S. example. When later the U.S. economy, became strong again, and they put the bonds back in the market, and the U.S. Treasury made a profit. They put $3 trillion US. That's the central bank, which was gave $3 trillion US profits to the Treasury. The Treasury decided, the equivalent of our Ministry of Finance decided not to use the money for consumption. They used it for the next crisis. That is why when COVID came, the U.S. did not blame COVID. They rather went into action, gave part of the money, and that is what was used for the COVID, how do you call it, the jabs and the vaccines. This is an advanced economy preparing for the next crisis. And it was written all over. Especially one of the examples I was giving was SARS, Ebola, from our neck of the woods, as Americans would say. Right? It was a West African and East African experience as one of the reasons why we should prepare for the next crisis. Right? I've already mentioned the haircut. So you're asking for the pre-existing. I've mentioned the fact that as a result of the fiscal engineering that was done, putting things under footnote, including bailout costs, for which there was ESLA, including IPPs, for which was collateralized, and the money was not applied. And today, the loan for ESLA has become part of the impaired debt. Right? So these are a few reasons why we need a reset. So these are a few reasons why the IMF was talking about pre-existing conditions. These were conditions. They don't want to be held responsible.
So in resetting Ghana, like you say, what are you going to do? Because this is where we are.
Let me give
as far as our economy is concerned. Our economy, according to you, needs a reset. So what are you going to do? How are you doing the reset?
Let me give you 3 examples. Yes. We are going back. His Excellency mentioned some of the things that we did. First example, we will restore the sinking fund. We will take Ghana back to the markets because even a country needs to borrow for development. And let me remind you.
We'll go back to the market and start borrowing.
That is our goal. Because
why do we want to do that?
Why do we want to?
I think that the ordinary Ghanaian out there will ask, why do we want to do that? Yes. Why do we want to go back and borrow again? When one of the biggest complaints of your administration, or should I say, one of the biggest complaints here by the NDC is that, this government has borrowed too much. I mean, over the past 7 or 8 years, they've borrowed too much, and it has landed in this. And our debt stock is hovering at around 700 billion or so.
No, yeah, I know.
And the aim is for us to come back and take us back to the Eurobond market and keep on borrowing and adding to our debt stock. While we already have this debt to clear.
Let's save time because we know the narrative. So let me give you the reason. Let's save time for the reasons, right? We were in an IMF program when we borrowed against the airport tax for Terminal 3. We were in an IMF program when we borrowed against our oil revenues, which could have gone for consumption, as they did, for the pipelines, which is bringing,
the gas pipelines.
The gas pipelines. We were in an IMF program when we borrowed for a Chiabo, and we're in China. We didn't cross over with the fund. And again, use our oil revenues and the gas, it was to include gas so that we can pay, faster, the ones we export through the grid, right? So there's nothing wrong with borrowing. Again, let me go and give Ghanaians an example. The mighty U.S., when President Biden has come to office, was saying our bridges are breaking down. They were built, some of them 100 years ago, and he is borrowing to repair them. Let's go to households. Let's go to households. When you start work and you want to buy your first furniture for your single room, right? Especially those of us who don't have homes in the city, but we end up here. Sometimes you take salary advance. It's a loan. Sometimes you take a loan from your institution. It's a loan, right? Why are you taking the loan? That is because you would have slept on the floor. You would have slept on the floor for 5 years before the savings from your salary can buy you that furniture. This is the essence of a loan. Fast forward. You want to move to 2-bedroom house. Salary, advance. The landlord is asking for it. Again, you take salary advance, to get into there before you start paying. When it's time for you to build your house, when I was building my house, there was no mortgage. You had to go and borrow from banks and whatever, right? But let's take it now. You take a mortgage, assuming the mortgage market. Those who try to build, you can see the difference with those who try to build by buying blocks and putting them down, buying roofing sheets, putting them down, and all that, as I did for my tertiary house, right? That's how you do it. Or took a loan from my institution to build the house. That is because when it comes to development finance, either by households, for businesses, and the rest, the best means of constructing those assets, of acquiring assets, is to borrow. But there comes the discipline that when you borrow, you must learn to repay. We cannot. So let me tell you, if we want to build a Kosomo Dam and save ourselves, it will take us the 40 years it took to repay the World Bank, the loan, to save ourselves. But look at the benefit by borrowing. Look at the light that it provided. For a long time, the Kosomo Dam was the one providing power, and even to, other. If we didn't pay, do you think we would go back to the IMF?
So essentially, it means if you borrow, it depends on what the money is used for.
Precisely. And I've given you examples.
Whether or not the money is...
I'm giving you examples.
Whether or not the money borrowed is being used for things that are beneficial or things that can, in the long term, still generate some income. That's what you're saying.
I don't think you are getting my point. The point I'm making is that every government must borrow for development. Every government must borrow for development. But I'm saying that from borrowing.
Yeah. From borrowing,
excuse me.
Yeah.
In a particular way, which led us to HIPIC, was a wake-up call. That, yes, every government must borrow for development. But if you are borrowing like the household and you are not paying, it has consequences. And and we saved that one. So when we got oil, I was a deputy minister. Do you know how long it took to debate the Petroleum Revenue Management Act? Going around to sensitize views by Ghanaians in 1.5 years, 2010 to 2011. The bill is 2011. I moved almost every aspect of that bill. And we promised ourselves that we should not repeat the HIPIC experience. Let's put some money aside. We were not doing it until 2014. You know what prompted the sinking fund? 2014, we borrowed for single spine, the arrears. We were borrowing to buy fuel for doing so. And those loans were also piling. Just as the T-bills we are buying today, they are piling.
And those are things we need to pay for.
We need to pay for. So I'm saying that is a lesson that was missed. And I'm saying that discipline of putting some money aside so that we can do development, and we are seeing it demonstrated, from youth schools to whatever and all that, which still enabled us to get a debt ratio of 57%, get a deficit of 6.1. Please don't believe, the doctrine of figures that said that we left debt of 8.3 and the rest. I have the figures I can show you. At least we were on a certain path where we would have put debt forgiveness, debt suspension, debt default behind us. All right? And I'm saying
because of the funds that were set up.
Because of the funds that were set up, precisely. And let me give you another example. I'm sure you have babies just as I have.
Well, I don't have any yet.
Any yet? Okay. We were all babies.
I hope to have some in future.
Yeah, we are all babies. We were all once, babies.
Yes. But I have a lot of nieces and nephews.
Nieces and nephews.
Yes.
Besides, I was just going to come to that. You see, if your sister or your brother, senior ones, have children, they will catch cough. Children, when they're growing up, they'll go and mix up. They'll go and mix up with somebody who has kata. As kids, they want to go and play. If you don't put money aside, you start putting money aside, from your salary, something you were not doing, in anticipation of making sure that in the night when you are scared and you take that baby, you go to the hospital, you can go into your pocket. You don't go to your next door first. Of course, some do it out of necessity, so I don't want to be condescending, right? I mean, some really live on very tight.
Yeah, tight budgets.
And they are tight budgets. Yeah. And they are the reasons.
Hand to mouth.
They are the reasons we have a tax schedule. Let me divert a bit. They are the reasons we have a tax schedule that says, let's exempt their income. Those above them, let's apply 5%. Those above them, let's apply, the skills. All the way to 35. We reduce the skills for the rich to 25. The current administration, which is talking about flat rate, they increase it to 35. Through the mismanagement of the economy. But let's not digress too much. So I'm saying that experience is why parents save. Shouldn't the nation learn from it? So we establish the buffers.
So you want to come back and come and do that again?
Because
establish buffers and put money aside
for
a rainy day. For a rainy day, so
let me give you. Do you know that we established?
And this government is not doing that?
Oh, tell me if they did. Why is the president not, the vice president, talking about the very things he was talking in 2016? But I'm saying it took 1.5 years for us to get a structure of the use of petroleum revenues that would resolve problems of the past. That is what was collapsed. It requires a reset. So, otherwise, we are going to be defaulting and defaulting and defaulting. And everybody.
So still talking about what you would do in order to do this particular reset of the economy that you talk about. What are the concrete things that you would do which would actually reset the economy?
We'll pay that
this government is not already doing.
From the example we'll start repaying our debt and make sure Ghana doesn't default. again. We start repaying our debt. 2, or we don't go back to HIPIC. We want to be sure.
I mean, we'll definitely repay our debts. We are negotiating that we can defer some of the repayment of the debt so that it gives us space to be able to help.
No, for Mahama to pay.
Well, we don't know if Mahama is going to be president.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know. The people of Ghana will decide.
Okay.
We don't know if Mahama will be president or
so
Dr. Baumia will be president.
I would hope that when my good friend Dr. Baumia becomes president, he will set up the sinking fund. Otherwise, the hump you are talking about is from 2016, 2026, 2027, 2028. It's inevitable. The minister has already said that when he came back from the creditors, that they want us to set up a fund for repayment. Should he take outsiders to tell us? Because the debt you are talking about, which was suspended, yes, including the Ghanaian debt that was suspended, is supposed to be paid from 2026. We have a reprieve for only 2025. So yes, it may be President Baumia, it may be
President
Mahama, as it's certainly going to be. We have the experience and the mechanism for paying down debt. So Ghanaians don't have to worry.
So apart from setting up a sinking fund and putting money aside for a rainy day, what else?
Yes, we want to go back the revenue projects, because when you are borrowing, you must also have a strong revenue.
Yes.
We did ICOMS. We did GRA, we merged IRS and VAT. Those reforms were suspended. They were never done. Today, they are conditions in the IMF program. We don't need them as conditions. We started them. There were no conditions in the 2025 in the ECF. We tabled them as things we want to do, right? Things we did and things that we want to do, right? In the memorandum of understanding. Those were government initiatives. So we wouldn't have a problem. The expenditure projects, which we started, GIFMIS, I'm sure everybody knows about GIFMIS, which was for fiscal discipline, and we're drawing attention of Ghanaians to the fact that spending outside the GIFMIS would land us into trouble. Today, you do know the value of pipeline. It used to be on the Ministry of Finance website. It was removed. We have 77 billion Ghana cedis of pipeline. You see what President Mama is saying, when I come, I'll tackle pipeline. Pipeline projects. Out of that 20 billion, 23 or so was paid, leaving about 50-something billion of arrears, work in progress and continuing, from suppliers and contractors, including ESLA, which was to have cleared some of that debt. Today, do you know that the ESLA debt, so the debt owed to the IPPs, which was to be settled through ESLA, which what we did, and that's a link to the banking. Let's talk about it.
We'll get into it. We'll get into it, definitely.
Do you know that debt, which should have been paid from ESLA, part of it has been added, to debt to be repaid over a period of time as part of the debt restructuring that we are doing. So from revenue to expenditure to sector policies, we have learned. And we're sincere with Ghanaians.
Yeah.
Schools and the rest. That if you are doing a project and you are based on crude oil and borrowing and the rest, and the prices fell, you must curtail. We have that experience. When we say we will curtail the schools, it was taken against us. But the debt situation would have been worse. Sectors, energy. We are going to tackle energy, right? Roads. We are going to tackle roads. Bridges. Nakosomo and railway. Do you know that, the loan from Japan was approved or nearly approved before we left office for the bridge. 8 years, we've not even started work on it. Money. So that's soft loan. That's not even expensive loan from Japan. Now, it was to be the first year loan after HIPIC. 8 years. It doesn't need a reset. For a government that takes 8 years.
All right. So in all of this, you're talking about reset in Ghana. You're talking about you're talking about being able to get enough money to put aside for a rainy day. You're talking about doing all of these projects. In all of this also, just like Dr. Bamia is also saying, you're talking about, cutting certain taxes.
He wants to now implement them.
Well,
he had 8 years.
Well, he talks about cutting taxes. He talks about cutting taxes.
Who increased them?
You also talk about cutting taxes and all of that. In all of this, what I want to ask in all of this is that you want to do all of these things, but you know the current state of the economy, and you know that when it comes to our revenue, about 80 to 81% of our revenue comes from taxes, right? So if you are reducing all of these taxes, as President Mahama has promised, and you want to be able to even set aside enough money for a rainy day, you want to get back to debt repayment so that we are not defaulting on our debts and all of that. Why are you going to get money to do all the rest of the things that you talk about wanting to do?
Because
how will you generate enough money to do all the things that you say you want to do, including payment of school fees of first years, including the roads that you've talked about that you want to build, and a whole host of other things.
I've heard it, so I'm
yes.
answering. First of all, we'll make better use of 2 additional oil fields. We did most of what I was talking about, the repayment, construction, backing loans, and the rest with 1 oil field. So we'll make better use of 2 oil fields. We'll bring back the companies that were sent back packing to come back and make Ghana that hospitable place for investments. Those that left oil fields, those lithium and all this. And you heard His Excellency saying that we are going to have from the experience that we had with oil, we want to extend it and say any new find of natural resources, right? Any new find of natural resources must come into that PRMA structure. You must put some aside for buffers. You must put some aside to pay down debt so you can borrow and get your A+. He even gave you the ceiling, which is debt ceiling of about 65% and debt floor of about 55%. You can even go to 50%. And you operate within that so that the repayment of your debt will be easier. I'm saying that there were opportunities that were missed. MCC, if we can bring them back, we will fix them so because they were the ones who were going to provide money for the front end. So there were things that were done that were not done in the last 8 years. Extending ICOMS to ITAX so that you link, for revenue purposes. Look, when you import all these things that were imported, the first VAT that was collected on it, was at the port, presumably because they were imported, right? You claim input tax credit on it, what we call input tax credit and refund under the VAT. Now, if the ITAS had been continued as we had planned, right, despite digitalization, if ITAS had been continued, customs, immediately you pay that VAT, right, it goes straight into the ITAS system because they are integrated. That's why if it's like GIFMIS. IFMIS is integrated, expenditure management. And you have that. So for compliance, if you are a business, because what happens with VAT is that you import this equipment, you are not a consumer, right? Those who were advertisements are the product. So the VAT you paid at the port will be deducted from the VAT you charge, on airports, on adverts. You have a right to offset the tax you paid on this against, the tax that you are charging for adverts. If you do not, excuse me, one of the things about VAT is that there's a lot of fraud there. So if you had done ITAS, you don't need to come and lock, the door here because Starr FM has not paid their VAT. You will send a demand notice because the tax you are evading has been fed, the details from the port into the domestic tax system. So before the officer comes to you, he would have just gone into the system. This is the VAT, you charge. This is the VAT you were charged. You are supposed to deduct. So let's say you paid 80, at the port. You collected 100. You are supposed to pay the difference of 20. If you inflate the 80 to 90, and you don't have an integrated system that will give you timely information. That's how come GRA loses 10. GRA can get that easily. I don't even want me to repeat it. Right? GRA will get that 10. You are evading through the integration of the two systems. And that's another way of raising revenue, to tackle the projects. So I'm saying, one, we have managed to do infrastructure, big ones, with one oil field, with less resources. One of the things you are doing is to make sure that you bring back those who felt hospitable in the country to give you more oil fields. And you'll be able to meet, your expenditure needs. Of course, we are going to rationalize expenditure, also and make savings. And the third point is that the promises are not implemented in 1 year. The promises are for the term. And therefore, just as we had a medium-term, plan for all the things that we're doing and we're able to tame that, we are going to repeat that same experience. Those are 3 examples. There's more. But 3 answers as to how we are going to raise the revenue. Continue, the tax reforms and the rest. And let me allude to a point that you made. Tax rates are high. Mm-hmm. Tax rates were low before they went high. I told you the corporate tax rate was 25 when we were doing all this. At a point in time, you can go back to the structural adjustment program era. Some of us have that, and we liked, the history is important for us. The corporate tax rate used to be, and the top marginal rate used to be 65, 55, 50. And we're reducing them gradually. The target is 20%. And then you expand the base, which is why you have VAT here and the rest. So it was the current administration that raised it to 35. Right? So don't ask me how, when I did it with 25. Ask them, how come? We didn't have, traditionally we had 2 levies, which you introduce when you are in an IMF program as part of the expenditure austerity. Temporary import duty and fiscal stabilization levy. These were the only 2. So today, if we have 25, of course, we brought in ESLA and a few which we had said would have a sunset. That's why it's a sunset clause, because they go away after the IMF program. If you go into, and we're improving, such that we'll be on our own feet, right? So they introduced the plethora of taxes. We manage with less levies, and we're warning. I heard the vice president saying he was going to eliminate those levies because they are not bringing any revenue. Yes, I have if we do TV, I would have showed you. I have the graph. He's right. All those levies, all the headache, all the evasion and avoidance that we were suffering, they didn't bring in 0.5%. All those levies. That's why we said first, before he said that we abolish those taxes. And focus, you see, the spine of the tax system, the spine of the tax system is on 4 taxes. Income tax, which has the personal income tax and the corporate income tax. So that's income tax. VAT. That's why you have a general consumption tax, which shouldn't be tampered with too much. The next is import duty. And they all have a purpose. VAT and income tax generate revenue. But sometimes we use income tax, to also provide incentives for businesses to come. We provide some exemptions. But their main objective is not, promotion of investment. It's for revenue raising, these 2. And these are paid by every Ghanaian. Then you have 2 others which are discriminatory. If I drink coffee that is produced in Ghana, I don't pay import duty. Right? If I decide to order
to import it, yeah,
I pay import duty.
Yes.
That's why it's a protection.
Okay.
And then the final one is excise on petroleum, on alcohol, and on tobacco. Basically, it used to cover some luxury goods. In fact, it's graduated. If I bring a Benz, I pay more. If you bring a Nissan, by virtue of the value being low, you pay less. These are the Lantam. Let me tell you that any tax that you introduce after this 4, It's only mimicking those success.
Okay. So you're still listening to The Morning Star here on Star 103.5 FM. My guest in the studio is Seth Terkper. He's former finance minister under the John Mahama administration. He's been talking about why the NDC believes that the country needs a reset and how they intend to reset the country, especially as far as the economy is concerned. Let's remind you that if you want the best healthcare, you can get it with MTN eHealth, right? Because Multiplus, which is powered by MTN, is giving you the opportunity to access good healthcare with a subscription fee of just 25 cedis a month paid on your Momo. You sign on to a health subscription plan that gets you access to unlimited in-store consultations with qualified healthcare professionals and over 160 covered medications and tests at participating pharmacies at Ablekuma, Sakaman, Dansoman, Mamprobi, Kaswa, and other places. And all of this is made possible by MTN. To get this great product, download the Ayoba app. That's Ayoba of MTN. Sign up today with your Momo account. Take charge of your health conveniently and affordably. Sign up for Multiplus, which is powered by MTN today. And at Hisense, our commitment to you goes beyond just products, and we're here to support you with the best deals of the season, bringing back our once-in-a-year Hisense Factory Direct promo. So from the 19th of August to the 28th of August, it's ending very soon. So make sure that you are not missing out on it. Explore exclusive savings on our premium range of electronics and appliances. So whatever it is you want to buy, from an air conditioner to a gas cooker to a television set or a smartphone or whatever it is that you want to buy, visit any Hisense showroom across the country. Elevate your living space, right? It's an offer which is lasting for only 9 days, and we've got just a few days more to go. So while stocks last, go to any Hisense showroom and get yours. Terms and conditions apply. Call 030-255-0000 or visit any of the showrooms across the country or the website hisense.com.gh. And also don't forget to follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or that is X, and YouTube. Hisense is everyday prices for everyday people. We're also reminding you that for 15 good years, Quick Credit has been your trusted partner in micro-lending. They've been empowering lives and making dreams a reality. Today, we're excited to announce a new age because Quick Credit is now Bales Microcredit. Bales Microcredit is still committed to serving Ghanaians and changing lives. Bales is here to show you that everything is possible. Join us as we embrace a brighter future. Bales is financing your needs. We'll take a very short break here. When we return, we'll get into some other issues here, especially as far as the banking sector cleanup is concerned. We'll be right back.
The luckiest Star 712 hash. Luck is everywhere for everyone, yeah.
Here's to the friends who dialed star 712 hash and found no regrets. To the investors who struck gold. To the health workers who diagnosed luck with precision. To the tough guy who couldn't hold back his tears. To the passionate fan who couldn't contain his joy. To the seamstress who turned her hard-earned stitches into a bundle of happiness. And now, here's to you. Your next big win is right here.
Luck is everywhere for everyone.
Dial star 712 hash. Now join in the luckiest winning celebration. Every 1st July 2024. Over dial star 712 hash. Now I cost to take it as a group, individual, and now even as a community. Now win is the car cashier. Prizes are cashier in the community draw or go for the grand draw on the 30th of November 2024. Unlock your luck with star 712 hash. Now join in the winning streak now.
The luckiest
Star 712 hash.
Luck is everywhere for everyone, yeah. The luckiest.
What's up, beautiful people? It's your favorite Ghanaian twins with the red hair, Lali X Lola, and we bring you our Fire and Flow concert happening on the 24th of August at Show Lounge off the Spintex Road, 7 p.m. sharp. This event is curated by Bella Mundi, and keeping it active is Rhythm's Live very own Sheldon the Turn Up and DJ Spliff. It's our stage, our rules, and we bring in double the dose of energy with the Afro Harmony Band, courtesy of Lynx Entertainment. Live the music. It's gonna be a magical night full of good music, dancing, and laughter. So learn our songs, bring your loved ones, family, and your friends. Get your limited tickets on our website, www.lallyxlola.com, or dial *714 *11 *18 hash. No delay for where we day, cause yawa no day.
Let's have breakfast on the Morning Star. This is Star 103.5 FM. Simply the best.
You're welcome back to the Morning Star. This is Star 103.5 FM, and we have been having a conversation with the Honorable Seth Terkper, who is a member of the NDC. Of course, he was former finance minister, and we've been talking the NDC's manifesto and some of the policies, especially as far as the economy is concerned, policies outlined in there to reset Ghana, as they say. Honorable Terkper, let me come back to you on this. When I look at one of the things that former President Mahama says he will do in his first 120 days in office, point 13, he says that he will institute inquiries or forensic audits into the following matters of public interest. He talks about illegal printing of money, the $58 million National Cathedral, illegal and inflated single source contracts, COVID-19 expenditure, PDS, Ejapa, SML, ambulance spare parts deal, 13th Africa Games, SkyTrain, Pualugu Dam, Matsets, Galamsey fraud, missing excavators and tricycles, Sputnik V, bus scandal, and others, including the collapse of indigenous Ghanaian banks and financial institutions at a supposed cost of 25 billion. This is what former President Mahama says he will do. President Mahama says he will do in his 120 days. Now, yesterday, when Vice President Bawumia spoke to us, he met us at the Movenpick Hotel. He says our former President Mahama doesn't understand what happened in the banking sector and doesn't understand certain things about the economy. Otherwise, he will not be making statements like that. Let me quote the Vice President. He says, "We saved the deposits of 4.6 million bank depositors who really were going to lose their deposits if those banks were not saved. I don't understand whether the former president has taken his time to understand the banking sector. Some atrocious things were done, and this is why these banks had to be saved. They were not collapsed. They were merged into other banks, and no banking depositor lost 1 cedi. Everybody maintained. But very bad things happened, and some of the banks broke all the rules and extended loans way above single obligor limits. They were given, in some cases, 1 billion by the Bank of Ghana to help them out of the mess, and they only got deeper into the situation. Other banks were given capital to save the situation, and they used that money to set up Capital Bank instead of rescuing the problem that they had. They took the money from the central bank and set up other businesses which also collapsed. Some took money and invested in private properties. So it was against this background that the governor came to report, and this is one of my nightmares in the last 8 years. Most people didn't understand how close we were to a collapse of the entire banking system. This is how we had to merge many of these banking sectors into other banks, and we saved 4.6 million depositors. So in Dr. Bawumia's view, President Mahama doesn't really understand what happened in the banking sector. Otherwise, he wouldn't be saying that when he comes into office, you'll be doing forensic audits and what have you into the collapse of some of these indigenous banks and what have you. You were finance minister before, and so you know how the financial system works and how the banking system works. Does President Mahama not understand what was happening, which resulted in what happened? Like
if every leader,
the vice president has said.
if every leader aspiring to be president has to be an expert in every sector of the economy which comes under his purview, we would not get one person qualified enough to be president. Let me repeat. I'm saying that if everybody aspiring to be president has to have knowledge, deep knowledge, of all the sectors which will come under his purview, we will not have one person qualifying to be president. That is why we have a cabinet. And that is where leadership is important. And with all due respect to Vice President Baumia, with all due respect, and I say with all due respect because he's senior, but some of the people in President Mahama's administration, least of all who were running the central bank, were his seniors at the central bank, capable of giving President Mahama solid advice on how to tackle banking sector crisis. We had a whole global banking crisis. I don't think that President Trump, I don't think President Biden, those who managed those crises, needed to be central bankers to resolve the banking crisis. And it was global. You have only few people in finance, and yet they resolved them based on a mark of leadership. So again, with all due respect to my president and to my vice president, I think the statement is condescending. It's very condescending. And this is a man, President Mahama, who has been in government for more years. And he chaired an economic management team around which there were experts. And he managed an economy. Let me explain what we sought to do. First, it was President Mahama who agreed that the audit that led to the crisis should be conducted. So it was concluded under our administration.
The audit of the banking sector?
Yes.
And what was happening within the banking sector?
2, we had the option of doing what was done. Right?
Mm-hmm. That is the order of getting banks to merge.
No,
consolidating.
You collapse one bank to merge with another. Let's put the terminology as I want the audience to follow what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
We had if they were merged, can I ask a question? Where is Amwabin's share? Because when you merge, right, when you merge two things, it's a partnership.
Yes.
So where are their shares in the new banks? Where's my former boss's share in the new banks? Unibank. And where is Dr. Indum's share in the merged banks? That's what the merger means. It's not a takeover. And even in the takeover, you compensate, the people. In a takeover, one is taking over the other, but you compensate. And you are not protecting investors who will come and invest. And then you create another entity to take over. You will not. So we had that option. Let me tell you the reason why we did not go that route. When the banking sector crisis started,
mm-hmm.
the United States started with that policy. The UK started with that policy. Bear Stearns were the ones to be collapsed. but sends in another bank. Let it, after the investors, it's private, right? So let it go. After all, it's like if you're a cocoa seller and you borrow or something, or you face even genuine calamity and you cannot buy your inputs and the rest, you collapse, right? I don't think anybody would have an issue if private businesses, collapse. The reason they stopped was that when the crisis was found to be deep and was going to affect Bank of America and some of the big banks, they realized that they were depositors. They realized that those businesses, right, were not to be punished for the sake of how the banks were run. And that's how the banks were saved. And that's how come, as I explained earlier, the central bank and the central bank and the treasury, and I read a book on this, came together, right, to save, to buy the debt. And then after they saved it, that's what we call the quantitative, easing.
Mm-hmm. So that's what was done in the American case.
Yes.
And in the
UK
they had
case. A strong economy.
And in the Ghana case?
I'm saying that they have a stronger economy than Ghana.
Yes.
You saw what happened. When we applied, you see, depositors are saying, it's not true that nobody is owed. It's not true. There are depositors today. Please, if you make an announcement, they will come and tell you that, their deposits have not been paid. Right. But it didn't mean that we folded our arms.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you one example for lack of time. When we were going to do ESLA, ESLA has two components, energy sector and then enhanced road levy. We did the ESLA to pay down the debt, which government was owing those banks. And it would have lapsed because the amount was known, $2.2 billion US. Parliament asked us to calculate to the penny, and we did, including MBB. We did, to the penny. So apart from rounding off, $2.2 billion US. You can Google. April 2017, President Baumia and the then Minister for Finance were in Washington, D.C. at the IMF World Bank Spring meetings, and they gave an assurance. If I knew it was coming, I would have Googled for you to read it. They gave an assurance that there were enough funds. There were enough funds for the energy sector, to pay the energy sector debt and the road contractors.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, they were even going beyond what we did and borrow to pay off in advance so that ESLA can be used to pay. Right, so ESLA can be. So back to what did we do? When the revenue started flowing in, the first institution that government owed did not pay subsidy, which needed to come back quickly to strengthen the energy sector, was VRA. You can Google. So we did the VRA. So we called VRA management to the table. So this money, did you use your own money? Where did it come from? It transpired that they had gone to borrow from about 13 banks, 11 or so banks. So we said, okay, we have a banking sector difficulty because of doomsaw and all those problems where, there were defaults, private sector and government itself could not pay the banks. So we brought the banks, headed by the president or chairperson of the Institute of Bankers. And we formed subcommittees. And we said we're going to do a precondition. If VRA borrowed from the banks, and those loans were part of the non-performing loans because government was not paying, then form a subcommittee, we'll collect ESLA, right? We'll pay VRA, but we put in an account. And that money will be used to settle the loans that they are going to take from the banks. You see where the connection is coming from? Mm-hmm. Because part of the banking sector debt we are talking about includes government's own SOE debt. And we started paying. When the monies came in, the first money that came in 2016, you can Google it there. We paid 500 million Ghana cedis to the banks immediately. And the reason we set up the subcommittees was that they were to recommend. And the recommendation was that over a period, right, of 3 to 5 years, in other words, you are converting the money owed into a loan, the loans that they took. You were restructuring it. Now we know about restructuring over a longer period. That's why we say SR should have lasted 3 to 5 years, because we calculated it for Parliament. Mm. So we said, these are flows that are going to come in. In the next 3 to 5 years, the extra money that will come, calculate, and let's see when it would fix all the loans. After there were loans that were impaired. So we paid upfront 500 million to make them quickly liquid. And then the rest was to be paid, right, over the 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. The flow started before we left office. Because excellence has started coming in, the flow started. We approached Afri-Exim Bank and brought the IPPs whom government was owning. And they are bankers. We asked them, can you bring your bankers? Because if you say you borrowed. And we were going to take 500 million US dollars, because their debt is in forex. 500 million US dollar term sheet from Afri-Exim, which we handed to the new administration, because the flows were not fast enough for us to tackle but we're planning for the IPPs. So the same scheme was to happen. The debt that is owing, right, and the portion that was borrowed from banks, because they operate on loans. Most businesses operate on loan. Mm-hmm. After the initial equity, most businesses operate. So they also agreed to bring their bankers, so that when Bank of Ghana provides the forex equivalent of the cedis that they would have been paid, that term sheet was never implemented. That's why we have the IPP debt to today. It would have been extinguished in 3 to 5 years. In fact, it would have been earlier, because the 500 million US dollars that we were taking for Afri-Exim was the amount we were owing. So they would have been paid. Mm-hmm. And then we would have been paying Afri-Exim. So that we have no need for the IPP debt.
Right.
We took a cedi loan because the expenditure was in cedis. We did a tender, and one of the local banks won. We took an initial 1 billion Ghana cedis and started paying off the contractors from the enhanced road levy element of the ESLA. We started paying the contractors. We also came the Contractors Association. But the same condition, if you borrowed from a bank, and the banks have their records, the money will be used to settle. So gradually, the non-performing loans, because these entities are big, mm-hmm. right, started to go down. And we would have employed the same process for anybody who was owing a bank and didn't pay. At least government's money, contractors. That's why, because we awarded the contracts. And we needed a strong, because we're big in infrastructure. So we wanted them to continue borrowing from the banks. I'm saying there was a promise in April that ESLA will be used, and even a loan taking, to fast track this procedure. Why are we talking about ESLA today? Let me give you the numbers. As of last year, and I've still seen the new ESLA report, it was not being put on the Ministry of Finance website. But as of last year, or 2023, ESLA had brought in nearly 40 billion Ghana cedis. question to the Vice President. Even if to test of this went to pay entities that were owing banks, you know, government has a lot of suppliers, a lot of contractors and the rest. Even if the ESLA had gone and the banks, we were dealing with the banks, so they knew, they give us a list. How much did he say we borrowed? How much did he say the debt was?
For the banks?
25. Is it not 25 billion?
25 billion so far.
And I'm saying,
to clean up the sector.
And I'm saying ESLA has brought in nearly 40 billion, let's say 35 billion already. 10 billion in excess. 10 billion in excess. So you take it that it's not everybody who borrow from the bank who government owed. So let's take it that we'll use the 10 billion to pay them. Wouldn't we have had that 25 billion? Wouldn't we be able to have saved the banks?
So your point is we should have
let me land.
We should have saved the banks.
Let me land. That was our strategy. Mm-hmm. Because as I told you, we are a weaker economy.
But what about when he says some monies were given to some of the banks and then they squandered the money? Used the bank monies to set up other businesses and all of that.
Please, let me land and then we'll come to that. Okay. Let me land. So I'm saying that, look, the projection for ESLA, right? The projection for ESLA, which is being used to pay the collateralized debt, which was not paid under this thing, is that it will bring in 66 billion Ghana cedis by 2026. I can assure Ghanaians that if we are able to disentangle the ESLA elements, you know, when we come to power through negotiations and set it aside, we'll settle, you know, the debt. The difficulty is that it was collateralized. It was to last 3 to 5 years. It has been extended, 2015 to 2025 when we take over. Instead of 3 to 5 years, 10 years. Why blame somebody? Why blame poor mama? With all due respect. Even if he didn't have, you know, a degree in economics, in banking, he had people around him. And mind you, ESLA was what? The nuisance tax. They say the buck stops here. So where did it stop? It stopped on President Mahama's desk. So he had to be convinced that what his, you know, ministers and others were telling him. And we had engineers, we had bankers, including central bankers there. You know, remember we are dealing with banking. So the then governors were involved in what I'm talking about. So there were no lack of expertise at the table at all. That's why I say, with all due respect to your vice president, there was no lack of expertise. And mind you, we're talking to Afri-Exim. And we're taking to international banks from whom the IPPs had gone to borrow, Standard and the rest. It's the vice president that they were saying that all these people were ignorant with the scheme that we put in place. No. You know, so I beg to differ.
So it wasn't the best route to get the consolidated bank.
No.
To ask UT and Capital to join GCB and all of that. It wasn't the best route.
I am not against, but I ask you a simple question. Where are their shares? If you merge, where are their shares in the new entity? Where are their shares in the new entity? You say you merged. So where are their shares? Where are their assets? Some of them own assets and the rest. So where are the shares? This is a technical question. Where are their shares? Yes, that's the role of every central bank. And I'm coming to your second half of the question. Mm-hmm. The role of every central bank, just as they are talking about bailout, they bailed out, is to bail out banks. And if there's a misappropriation, and that's the U.S. experience, if there's a misappropriation, if there was, you know, how do you call it? It's not always misappropriation, sometimes even judgment. Judgment in giving a loan to somebody who has a good, you know, how do you call it? Let me give you an example of how the economy is linked. we give a loan to somebody, who is into imports or into manufacturing. When the government decided that they would implement the benchmark, do you know what the benchmark did? If the benchmark is 30%, it means that if a commodity is coming in at $100, 35 means that the value on which the tax will be based is 65. Two things. You are reducing the tax. You see why the tax is not dynamic? But the most important thing for the manufacturer is that goods that came in like this pen, which was imported, which was being assessed at 100, is now being assessed at 65. So straight away, you have removed its protection. Remember I spoke about import duty. That if you use BIC, which is produced in Ghana, you don't pay. Of course, they have some inputs and the rest, but there's no import duty. If this pen is imported, it will have import duty. So it's protecting our local industries. It's protecting our local industries. So it is their own act. That's led to some of the challenges that he's now saying that. And he was a champion of this policy, just as he's a champion of the flat rate. We can come and do a program on the flat rate.
Yeah, we can do. We'll have time to talk about that later, but we're running out of time.
Yes. Here. So let me just wind up. So yes, loans were given to support the banks. Remember, we were coming to do out of Doomsaw and the rest where they were suffering.
Yes.
And that's the role of the central bank, is to bail them out.
And some of them squandered the money and used the money to set up other businesses.
Yes. But you don't collapse the bank. You take them to court on account of that.
And leave the banks.
The bank is a legal entity.
So leave the bank to survive and deal with the people who have misapplied
for the sake of
funds.
Depositors who lost their money, for which we are talking, we borrowed 25 billion. You borrowed what? When you are Desla. And I've given you the numbers. You can verify yourself. Because it has become a legal entity. It has become a legal entity. So deal with the shareholders. Deal with the shareholders. Because the US and the rest learned that if you did not go to and some of them were in prison in the US, if you did not, if you looked at the bank and say this bank is for that person and the rest, and you take that strenuous measure, you are putting pressure on the economy. Financial pressure on depositors and the rest. That's why they are not being paid. So it's not true that depositors are not being paid, despite a slide and all that. So I hope I've established a connection for you.
Well, this is a conversation.
And for your listeners.
This is a conversation we'll have to pick up again at another time. Unfortunately, we run out of time.
I understand.
Yes, unfortunately, we've had about 1 hour 20 minutes. Honorable Seth Terkper, thank you very much for joining us in the studio this morning.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Yes.
And I hope our listeners, like it. Those who were waiting for 1 hour.
I hope so too. Honorable Seth Terkper is former Minister for Finance, speaking to us this morning here on the Morning Star about the NDC's manifesto and other matters arising.